Hey there, it's Christian from 7 Game Network, and we're here to continue with our Empire at War, Tactica and card analysis. We're going to look at a force villain today. We're going to look at the lowly, you might say, servant of the dark side. But I think he's a little more than lowly. This one's pretty good. So we're going to have a look at the dice. We're going to look at his ability, health pool, points, builds he can fit into, cards you can play with him, all sorts. Now we're going to start out with looking at the dice. And what we see is, well, we see 5 black sides and a blank. We've got 2 melee damage sides, the 1 and the 3 for 1. That's quite a big side on a little dice like this. Now we've got a focus on there. So this is looking good. We've got 2 sides of damage, one of which is a big one, and we've got a focus there. Then we've got a shield, okay, but we see quite a lot of shields on sort of melee-based force villain characters, and then we've got the resource there. So that's good, in contrast to something like a Royal Guard, which of course doesn't have a resource on that basic die. Now then, that's pretty good. We've got to assess those die sides in relation to points cost. We're paying 8 points for this, and what I'm always going to do, of course, is look at, well, what are other 8-point blue characters that we could look at. Well, he's a good comparison with Night Sister, and in fact looking at those dice kind of feels like just almost a melee version equivalent of Night Sister. There are some important differences, but for 8 points you're getting the same amount of health, you have got the same amount of damage sides, although we've got a bigger side at 3 for 1. Is that better than a 2 that you don't have to pay for? Depends on your deck build. We've got focus on it, which is really good, and I would say a focus is better than like a discard or a disrupt on the Night Sister. I really like that. That focus becomes very important because, as you'll see in relation to his ability, what we really want to use Dark Servant for is he is very much a support, I think, to a more harder hitting, bigger, more powerful character. And so having focus on that die means you're much more likely to get the best out of that character, and so I'm very happy to use his die for that focus. However, of course, there is that slight drawback of using up a focus and not being able to hit that 3 for 1. But if you've got maybe 2 of these, very nice, or if we've got perhaps this other bigger character that's rolling some focus, well then they could focus him into his 3 for 1. And your resource is your resource. Now, to me, this character feels like he's either enabling another character with these, with the focus, or he's there to dish out some beats himself. That 3 for 1, that's pretty big. And if you have 2 of these, you're using your resources for the turn, but you can stick out 6 damage just from these 2. As we look in builds, you'll see that there's some other things that we can do with other characters, and it could create a lot of potential damage. So let's have a chat about this ability then, because it is good. Servant of the Dark Side's ability is before one of your other blue characters is defeated, you may move an upgrade from it to this character. So, for sake of argument, you've got Vader. He has got Kylo Ren's lightsaber on him, and he dies. You can move Kylo Ren's lightsaber across to Servant of the Dark Side. You've just given that lightsaber redeploy. That's really good. Now, the reason why that's good is if this is a support character to, maybe using his focus or adding some additional damage to another bigger, stronger, big hitting type character, then what tends to happen, of course, is your opponent will focus on that other character. They've got to get rid of them first. The bigger character dice, you're probably going to be playing the upgrades onto that character, so you get those big swings and big attacks rather than spreading it all out all over the place. And what's really great about this is that when that character dies, and they will, because that's your opponent's aim unless you're really thrashing them, you then, when that character dies, you're then normal situation is you're then left with a crappy little 1-die character left to try and finish the game off. The other character might have done loads of damage. You maybe have experienced this. You just can't quite finish the game with the other character. Servant of the Dark Side is so good because whatever the best upgrade is on that character that you're going to lose, you can shift it over to that Servant of the Dark Side. And where this becomes very strong is that if you've played another item, another upgrade out onto that bigger character that's got redeploy on itself, as soon as this character dies, and maybe he's wielding, two lights, he might have a standard lightsaber which has got redeploy on plus Kylo Ren's lightsaber. When that character dies, they're both going to go to Servant of the Dark Side, meaning you have got so much more potential for finishing the game out, getting that last 3, 4, 5, however much damage it is through to win. So this becomes very, very strong. This ability is not to be underestimated. So I think all in all, we've got a really good die here for 8 points, with some big damage potential with that 3 for 1. We've got a very, very good ability. So let's have a think about some builds and how we can make best use of this ability, and really what's the best value we can get out of that die. Now, one thing I will point out is if you're going to build with Servant of the Dark Side, there is the kind of obvious thing of you have to have 2 blue characters in there, otherwise you're not going to get to take advantage of his ability. And what's more is, really, to take advantage of his ability, you've got to have a blue character that's going to be a much juicier target for your opponent to attack than Servant of the Dark Side. Otherwise you're just getting no value out of his ability. You could say he's potentially distracted from the other character, but ultimately they're going to need to be attacking the other character and killing them first, the blue character, for you to get anything out of his ability. So that is a bit of a natural limitation. But let's have a look at what we could do. Now, a mono blue build that I actually did a deck tech on just maybe a week or so ago from when this video is posted, is a mono blue build. And that mono blue build is Elite 7th Sister and 2 of these Servants of the Dark Side. Now, what is really good about that is we've got that classic situation of a nice big chunky character, Elite 7th Sister's rolling 3 dice because of the ID 9. So you're going to be focusing putting upgrades onto Elite 7th Sister. So you can probably get 2 upgrades on her maybe before she dies, maybe even 3. If you're using something like It Binds All Things and you're getting things for cheaper, you could really load her up before she cops it. But when she does cop it, you've got 2 Servants of the Dark Side left. So you can move 2 of those upgrades to, 1 to each of these Servants of the Dark Sides. So what becomes very powerful about that is that all these resources that Destiny's built around the fact that when you kill a character, you lose the resources that you've sunk into upgrades on it. That's why redeploy is so very good. Servant of the Dark Side gives your other upgrades redeploy. It's very, very powerful. And so if you lose your 7th Sister and 2 upgrades are going to these other 2 Servants of the Dark Sides, that's really, really strong and becomes much easier to finish that game off, hopefully after 7th Sister's done loads of damage herself. And of course, if you've got 2 upgrades or 3 upgrades on and one of them's got redeploy, that's all moving to your other characters and you're not losing any of your investment. It's very, very good. And of course, you've got huge damage potential in a build like that. You've got focus on the ID 9s. You can be playing all sorts of. There's a lot more focus around in blue now, which is in blue villain, which is really quite helpful. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment as well. So your damage output in that deck can be really huge. It's mono blue. You can play some big no mercies. There's lots of fun stuff you can do with that. Another one that well, I've been having a little play with this, and I think it could be quite good, is actually a yellow-blue build, and that actually is a single die 7th Sister, but of course you're still getting those 2 dice because you still get the ID 9. I'm going to be doing a video on 7th Sister. She's very strong, and then you've got Dark Servant, and then also Gamorrean Guard. Now what I really find quite appealing about this setup is we've got access to yellow, so we can get access to some really nice removal, maybe some good meta options available for things like fair trade if you're playing Thrawncar. We also get access to some really cool yellow melee weapons now. There's things like the Vibro Axe, which is one of the new Empire at War cards, which could be really good, and Vibro Knucklers could also work very nicely in that sort of build. When you've got ID9s that could be doing big discards along with the Vibro Knucklers, there's quite a lot of control potential there, as well as, of course, all those melee sides. And then, of course, the big thing is that 7th Sister's still the big target. You're still going to be playing your upgrades onto 7th Sister, but now you've got a great big fat 11 health guarding Gamorrean guard to also look after your 7th Sister. So she's probably going to stay alive even longer. If you chuck a Force Illusion into the mix, it's going to be really hard for them to take down that 7th Sister. But even when they finally do, hey, Servant of the Dark Side is then going to be picking up that your best upgrade from it, and if you've got anything with redeploy, he's going to be getting 2 things, or you could put one, of course, onto the guard. Maybe you don't get to use his Guardian much and he's still got loads of health left. You've got options there. So I feel like that gives a real robust set of characters. It's quite a decent amount of built-in hit points, and there's a really good control mechanic with Guardian, which is, it's still underrated. Guardian is so very good, and I'm quite excited to play a little bit more with that build. There's just 2 examples of builds that you could use Servant of the Dark Side in. Now then, good cards to play with Servant of the Dark Side. Well, I think one of the drawbacks that we might need to look at overcoming is he's only got 7 health. I mean, that is a problem. He can be deleted quite easily. There are a lot of decks now that can dish out 7 damage easily in one go. Now, one thing I will say is most opponents, when they're playing against Servant of the Dark Side, they're not going to want to spend 7 health worth of damage to kill Servant of the Dark Side with his straightforward character die when there's a 7th Sister sat on the table, or another big juicy target also sat on the table. Early on, they're going to want to stick that damage onto that character. So in a sense, that where the 7 becomes a real problem is once that other character's down and there's been a redeploy, well, your other character, your opponent, he's probably got a character with some big upgrades on. Dealing 7 damage in one go isn't hard. And so even though your Servant of the Dark Side's going to rescue those upgrades, he's probably still only got 1 round to do the business because of that low health. So I think a Force Illusion played on him, which is a fantastic card, of course, in blue anyway, will be super strong. Things that you can do to keep them alive. I mean, I'm not going to go as far as saying cards like Rejuvenate become actually good. That's probably stretching it a little bit. But with the 7 health, trying to keep them alive that little bit longer is tough. And I think Force Illusion is probably your most efficient way of doing it and your best way of doing it. Another little card, a little upgrade that I've been experimenting with playing on him, which is quite cheeky, is Dark Council. Now the thing with Dark Council is it only costs 1. It's got 2 sides of focus on. It's also got a nice little draw mechanic and some resources on it. So what that upgrade does is a number of things. One is it's innocuous enough not to switch your opponent's attention from your main character. If you stick a great big lightsaber on him and he's only got 7 health, your opponent's going to start going for him and going to get him down quickly. You stick a Dark Council on in the first round, that still probably doesn't mean they're going to switch their attention to Servant of the Dark Side. And if they do, great, your main character is getting away with it. But Dark Council is giving you essentially access to 3 sides of focus when you roll him in, for enabling your other bigger character to do whatever cool stuff they want to do. It's allowing you focus to be able to focus Servant of the Dark Side 2 or 3 for one side, or it's got the resource that allows you to be able to pay for that 3 for one side, and it only costs 1. I really like it. I think that's a really nice little include to stick on him, that's not going to draw attention away from your character's main target. Now then, I mean, other things that you can play with him. I think the difficulty I feel with a character like this is he's very straightforward. There isn't really stuff that you're going to do that's clever with him. I mean, he does damage, which you've got to pay for. You could say maybe things that help you to pay for it are going to be good. I'm not going to say Imperial War Machine is good to play with him. I mean, it depends on your build, but I mean, it could be very useful. A 3 for free. But I feel like that's probably pushing it a little bit, unless you've got a build with other pay for sides. So maybe like a Magna Guard or something like that, and then you might think about it. But then your Electro Staff becomes better. And Electro Staff is something that you could put on him, of course. That would make him quite pokey, and of course you wouldn't have to pay for that 3 for 1 side. So Electro Staff definitely not a bad include. And after that, I mean, it starts getting a bit tenuous then. Yeah, bait and switch is good. Yeah, okay. Truce could be helpful because you're getting the extra resource to be able to pay for his sides. But ultimately, what he's there for isn't to do clever stuff, isn't to have clever tricks played on him. He's 7 extra health for your deck to be able to keep going, get whatever upgrade it is your main character drops, and keep bashing through for the win. I mean, in terms of playing against him, and remember he is only 7 health. I think that the big Achilles heel of characters like this, and of characters, of course, of 3 character builds, is things like thermal detonator, Relby mortar guns, stuff that's just going to spray out lots of damage all over the place, is going to really hurt characters like this. We can't really get away from that, and so that's probably, if your meta is lots of this going on, I'd probably be thinking about something like that, because that's going to clear up a deck with Dark Servant in pretty quickly. So there's Servant of the Dark Side. He's a pretty straightforward character, but I think he's very cool. I think he gives you a lot more staying power and resilience with your blue villain decks, and after you've got your big character going down, Servant of the Dark Side can finish it, because he can go from having no upgrades to having 2 and wielding 2 lightsabers to finish the job, and that is very strong. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed the video, please click like. If you want to stick some comments down, stuff that I've maybe missed, remember we want these videos to be a resource for our community so that everyone gets to get their heads around Destiny more. That's certainly my hope for these videos. And if you want to get involved and contact with myself, or just get involved more, then I've got a Patreon, which you're very welcome to come and join that little community that we've got going on there. Anyway, until next time, keep enjoying your Destiny.